Hi everyone, it's Joanne at Boon here. Welcome to my studio. Gosh, it's hot. Oh, grey has gone, by the way. I decided to do a bit of DIY on my hair. It looks a lot better. Right, let's get on with this. One of the lessons we did previously was a monochromatic painting. Thank you so much for sharing all your work with me as well on Facebook or on social media and Pinterest and lots and lots of different places. And I just get such a joy knowing that you painted along with me and learning at the same time. So thank you so much for that. I can't stress enough the importance of tonal value. It is really the key to successful painting. Once you understand tonal value, then colour will come naturally to you. And I started off as a beginner. I started off with full colour, got so confused with everything and nearly gave up. And then I went back to basics and started to produce lots of monochromatic work. And really, I can't stress enough how much that helped me. I want you to get to that point as well. So really, really practice your tonal value. You can do it in pencil, you can do it in charcoal, you can do it in paint. Just practice it. Honestly, you'll see a massive improvement in your work. So this new lesson, it's kind of a monochromatic painting. I want to move us on a little bit and we're going to introduce a little smidge of colour into that. So you're spinning one plate, whoa, we're going to spin another and add a little bit of colour into that. So we're using two colours. I also want to show you some nice kind of tips and techniques as well. Maybe just kind of will help you to kind of create a little bit of texture in your work. And what that will do as well is it will make your work individual to you, which is always a great thing. I have a little confession to make. You know I'm filming this on my phone and I just missed a little smidge at the top half of the picture where I'm painting the trees. So I hope it doesn't spoil your enjoyment. New equipment is on its way, which is fantastic news. It means I can kind of produce more comprehensive lessons. So please do subscribe and then you will get notifications of when those new lessons begin. So, shall we get started? Let's go into the studio and let's paint a nice two-colour landscape. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get painting. Okay, so before we get started, let's talk about the drawing. I don't press very hard with the pencil, so you might not be able to see a lot of the detail, or lack of detail, should I say, that's in this drawing. But I just want to share with you something really important because I do like to paint outside and I do choose to paint in holidays. And this particular sketch, I was in Devon and I had to leave early. I was like a little bit upset about that because I spotted the most perfect little picture or scene that I would like to have painted. So I had literally 5 minutes in a black biro. So let me just show you that's what I did on the day. Seriously, you're talking under 5 minutes, maybe 10 for a sketch like this. I've kept it very simple. I've put crosses where I want the whites, 3 whites, indications of a wall, the shape of the composition, and of course the cottage. And I feel that that is enough. That is enough information. If I'd have taken a photograph, then I would have worked from the photograph at home and probably put a little bit too much detail in there. So I like working from little quick sketches like this, and you can too. So we'll put that to one side because we don't need it now. Very quickly go over the materials we're going to be using today. Obviously, I'm using a nice big jug of water. I'm using the Bockingford paper. I haven't taped it down. It's got 2 bulldog clips at the top because I do intend to move the board around. I'm using a Payne's grey blue shade, and this is a nice little colour. I'm going to use the cobalt yellow, which is the Daniel Smith. You could use yellow ochre, any yellow really. We're just looking to put 2 colours down to create a nice combination. If you remember the last lesson we did, it was all about one colour and concentrating on values. And again, this is taking it a little step further because we're still concentrating on those values, but we're throwing another colour into the mix, and that's going to get your brain working. And hopefully we're going to produce a lovely little picture using this method. Before we put any paint down, I'm going to use a little bit of candle wax or wax resist just to put a few lights in there as well. You may have noticed, by the way, that I've got a piece of paper, a piece of Bockingford paper. It's an old painting that I'm using the back of, but I love to have that because it gives me an area to practice my washes in. And also I've got the margins here as well. So that's quite a nice thing to do because you can make little practice details on your paper before you commit to them. So wax resist, we've been through this. This is basically just to keep the highlights really. I'm not a fan of masking fluid. So I've got some little wall shapes there. We'll put some little dots in, maybe some marks here for some posts going up. We can drag it on its side. We can put little dots into there. We could catch a little bit on maybe the chimney pots. Now I know we're going to keep these areas a nice white colour. You could run wax in that now if you wanted to. You could put a little bit of wax in there just to help you along with that. But let's try and not do that. Let's try and preserve those areas naturally. Let's not rely on this method for too long. Okay, so we've got our wax resist in. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a nice big brush. This is a nice number 10. And we're going to completely cover this paper with washes. So we're going to use a little bit of the yellow. It's already going a bit green. A little bit of that yellow. And a little bit of the black. Now remember, we're starting from light to dark, so these washes shouldn't be that strong. It's always handy as well to have a little cloth just to clean your brushes now and again. We could wet it first, couldn't we? And do you know what's helpful as well? A spray bottle. So if I spray the bottom half, because I only really need to be careful around the top half. You could actually turn your picture upside down as well. I'm just blocking that water in, being mindful that I am not painting over that section. I can go right through that, doesn't matter. Again, we'll try and keep that section dry. And we'll pull that wash down. You're not actually painting the pathway or grasses or anything. All we're doing is just putting a nice clean wash on there. Okay. At this point, I may move the board, so I'm going to remove that so I can just tip my board around if I need to. So we'll just take a bit of that yellow and we'll just pull that through. That's so satisfying. Remember, trying to keep these areas white. Obviously, I've gone in a little bit on that, but we can do a bit of lifting away. It's not a problem. Let's put some darks in there as well. The light's coming from this right-hand side, so we could kind of suggest maybe some darker value here. Don't forget, we're going to put some trees in there as well. We'll bring that wash down. Let it all mingle together. Throw some more yellows on if you like. I hope you're painting along with me. If you're not, I can feel your kind of reaction to this, going, oh my gosh. But honestly, this is what painting's about. This is it. The joy of throwing paint onto a wet paper and just watching it kind of mingle together. Okay, comes a point when I need to stop. Now, let's just tip our board down a little bit and watch that wash run. Let's tip it sideways and watch it run. As long as we've kept this area nice and dry, we shouldn't have a problem. Sorry, there you go, you can see now. So I'm kind of controlling where it's going. The top half, I don't want it to run too far into the cottage. The bottom half, I'd like it to run all the way down, if possible. I can give it a bit of a helping hand as well. I can just maybe spritz some of these areas. Just bang it about. Okay, and there comes a time when the washes stop moving altogether. I'm hoping you can see that on camera. There we go. Let's put that back down again. I'm going to give that section a little white down. There we go. Just before that dries, I like to do this. I like to give things a little spritz. And it just creates a nice bit of kind of texture. Phew. Okay, we need to let this dry, obviously. So I'll see you in 5 minutes. So our paper is nice and dry now. And let's start at the top and work our way down. So let's think about putting some nice trees in this direction. And that's really helpful as well, because what that's going to do is going to show off these lovely lights that we want to preserve. I'll go down to a smaller brush for this, a size 8, and I'm just using the Payne's Grey. It's got a bit of a blue shade, that Payne's Grey, which is quite nice. So I'm going to load my brush, a little bit thicker than last time. Let's test it. Remember, watercolour's always going to dry lighter. You could turn your paper upside down to do this, by the way. Sometimes it's a bit easier, but let's just put some shapes in here that could be tree trunks. Let's take our brush and just push it onto that paper. So I'm actually ruining the brush because I'm pushing the hairs out so they splay a little bit, and that's quite nice because that gives us this nice textural feel. Take that wash down. Okay, so here I'm going to pull that dark across and around that shape, around the cottage, and maybe into these grass shapes here. Some more linear marks in that. Remember, pushing the brush into the paper and just catching that grain. I mean, I'm using a knot surface here, and that helps with you know, the texture of the paper helps as well, because as I rub my brush across it, I get these little indentations. There comes a point when I have to bring the brush back to its point and just start to block in some of these areas that I want to keep dark. Maybe might just have a couple more. Let's bring that down. So we could draw a little line here, couldn't we, to remind us that that's where we want the dark to be. Maybe drawing some smaller shapes. So I'm using the side of my brush to kind of scumble that wash in. And then I use the point of my brush to either paint smaller tree trunks or make sure that I am getting a nice clean edge around our cottage shape. It has gone in a little bit here, hasn't it? It's gone into the cottage shape, but don't worry. So it's giving us this nice impression of distant trees. Just before that dries, I'm going to give it a little spritz. Putting water into a wet wash or an already wet wash will create backruns. Something that we do try and avoid, but I kind of like the textural quality that it gives in a picture. So let's let that dry and then continue with the rest of the washes. So this is nice and dry now. So let's think about some value into the cottage shape itself. Let's start by putting some shadow work in there. And again, it's quite a light wash. We're not going too dark at this point. We want to keep this light, but I want to lose that one. So we'll just put that into this area here. Again, up into that area, keeping this right hand side nice and light. I can go around the doorway, but you don't have to, you could just block it all in. Side of the brush, just pushing that wash around. There's another little light we'll keep. So you're doing two things here as well, aren't you? You're actually blocking in this shape of the building, but we're also very much aware of the foliage here, this foliage here, these lovely shapes. I'll make sure to put some darks against those as well. Now it does seem quite dark, doesn't it? I know that, but honestly, watercolour always dries lighter. It took me a while to work that out, but it does. So let it dry first, let it dry. If it's too dark, we could re-wet it and lift a little bit off with the tissue, but I think it's probably about right. Okay, let's go back to the bigger brush now. The smaller brush is a fiddle brush, which means you start putting little details in, and that's the last thing I want you to do right now. Let's think about some slight greens. So taking that yellow, and I've got greens here, kind of a wall with greens on them. So I'm going to pop some of that into there, to that shape. Remember where your light's coming from as well. So if I then take some of the blue and I just pop it underneath, maybe pushing your brush in that direction is quite helpful. Maybe soften it off a little bit, and you start to find those little waxy areas that you put in to start with. A bit more yellow here, I think. And we're creating a nice pathway. Oh, nice dark. Be bold. Should we do the other side? Let's put some shapes in that look as though they're kind of coming downhill. I'm trying to leave a little gap here just to take the viewer up into the picture. Knowing when to stop, isn't it? I might flick a bit in there as well. I still want this to run, so I'm going to flick some more paint into that randomly. The only thing I'm kind of conscious of here really is creating this pathway. And then I'm going to spray it, or even, I'll spray it. You could tap more water into that and that'll allow it to run as well. Depends how brave you're feeling, doesn't it? Okay, if I tip my board up, I'll just put a cloth there to keep the easel clean. And I'm just going to tip my picture up, and I'm sorry if you can't see that. And I'm going to give it a little spritz, and I'm going to let it run. You'll see in a minute when I turn the board the right way around, probably around now. So we've got this lovely kind of random drips and runs, and the colour has all kind of bled in together. I'm just going to add a little bit more, I think, some slightly darker colour on this side, maybe drop some little bits in here. You know, it's your picture, and you can do what you please, really. Whatever makes you happy. I like to spritz that again to give it a bit of texture, but at the moment it's probably too wet. I'm getting a thirsty brush, by the way, here. I'm squeezing the water, squeezing that water out of my brush and just pulling some paint away as well, just to create more of a pathway. Someone take the brush away. Okay. It needs to dry. It definitely needs to dry. But what I want to share with you is, obviously I'll come back in 5 minutes and my picture will be dry. Just before it starts to dry, I want to do this. I want to create this same texture that we created up here. It's a little bit early in the day because it's still very, very wet. A couple of seconds longer and I'll be able to spritz that. We could try a little area just to see how we go. Oh, maybe we don't need to let it dry before we do that. I was thinking of your boredom levels and how long you'd have to wait, but actually that's working quite well. Okay, now we're going to let this dry. And really what we're going to do next is to start building the value. We've got lights, we've got mids. We need to be quite punchy now with our dark. So I'll see you in 5 minutes. Okay, so we're nice and dry now. Let's take the smaller brush and let's start to put a little bit of detail into the cottage area. So I'm mixing a thicker mixture now of the Payne's Grey, quite a strong one. And just a few little details, like for instance, the little bits in between the chimney pots. It's quite nice. A little bit under the eaves here. And I clean the brush. Just going to pull it ever so slightly down. Cleaning the brush and the softening off. There we go. I think we'll put a little bit of value into the roof shape as well, just to kind of re-establish it a little bit. Just a smidge. We don't want lots of darks in here. We want it to be a mid-tone. Just darken those a little bit. I'm using plenty of water. I'm just catching that darker area that I put in before. And just softening that away. And that really does help to establish the lights of the chimney. There we go. We'll come back to that and we'll put some windows in later on and do a little bit of tidying up, but let's start to think about this mass of greens and darks and lovely textures and dribbles, and how we can kind of remind ourselves of this, which is foliage, grasses, suggestion of a wall, pathway. Let's not lose sight of that. Let's take that Payne's Grey again. It's quite a dark mixture. And let's think about this kind of tumbling foliage here that's sitting on an old broken wall. Light coming from the right hand side. So I'm just going to catch underneath some of those shapes. I'm cleaning the brush. I'm just going to pull them down a little bit. And you see what's happening now? We're creating a nice light. Let's do the same up here. So we've got bushes and shrubs here. Light's coming from this way. So let's put in some darker values here. Let's clean the brush. Let's just pull those washes across. So we're not quite touching the light areas. We're just making that nice suggestion of a shape. Some little posts here as well. I'll bob a few of those in. The point of the brush, and then just soften them down. Let them do their own thing. Don't try and fight watercolour. You'll never win. Okay, I'm going to mix it a slight green colour now, so a little bit of the yellow and a little bit of the Payne's grey. Let's kind of establish this shape again, which is this shape, isn't it? This pathway that's kind of leading us in to our picture. I'll put some nice marks that will suggest that lay of the land, that kind of curve. Bags of water, and you start now to see your little bits of wax as well, which is quite nice. They start to appear. Let's put some really dark value in there. That's quite a strong Payne's grey now going in. Oh, more posts. We like posts. They're quite nice. They nicely lead you in to a picture. I've not forgotten about the wall here. We can just, it's still a little bit damp. I mean, you can wait for it to dry. I think we should, but let's see. I can just bob a few little shapes in here that might suggest an old wall. It's kind of negative painting, isn't it? We'll leave in lighter areas to hopefully suggest a bit of interest and a bit of texture. Might come back to that later. Same here really now. We want to kind of suggest the lay of the land again and how that is kind of tumbling down. So let's take the green again. And let's think about making some nice kind of grassy shapes that come down. Maybe like that. Lots of clean water, just pulling that wash out. I mean, your picture will not be the same as mine because we are using kind of very experimental methods, and we're also allowing for accidents to happen as well. And that's quite nice. Instead of fighting something, we're just allowing things to happen. And I'm kind of liking the way this is looking at the moment. Do we need to add more down here? Maybe just a few little darks. Random. I mean, we could be really random now. We could kind of maybe splatter some water into that. Maybe some down here. Maybe across. I'm just tapping my brush. Make that a bit darker as well. Just tapping my brush into that. I mean, there comes a point when I do have to stop, and there'll come a point when you have to stop. Okay. We're getting there now, aren't we? We're getting there. I really can't wait to put the final details into the house, which is what we're going to do next. And lastly, just picking up a few little details and maybe a suggestion of shadows. So I'll see you in 5. Let's do a bit of tidying up around this edge here. I'm going to take a little bit more of the yellow. I seem to have run out of that on my palette, so I'll just place a little bit more in there. Let's do some tidying up around the cottage itself. So let's take some of that green and let's do a bit of housework, a bit of tidying up. And this will allow us as well to come in on some of those shapes and give them a little bit more kind of emphasis. In the brush, and I'll push that wash around, maybe dropping a little bit more of the yellow. There we go. So we've got a nicer, darker value, and that's really making this area alive now. Let's do it again on the other side. Let's just put a little bit here into this area, and again it's doing 2 things. It's tidying up this area, but it's also helping to establish the shapes here clean brush, just pushing that wash up. And we're getting there, aren't we? Let's put some windows in our little house. I'll just go with the Pure Payne's Grey for now. I'm using the size 8 as well, nice small brush. Let's put some little chimney pots in there first. Okay, so I've got a nice little kind of gable end here with a window. And I can just about see my pencil lines here. Maybe a little bit more dark under here. Got water on my brush now, I'm just softening that down. I mean, the windows are not detailed at all. In fact, that's not what I want. I just want a suggestion. If you look close up, they look terrible, but when you stand back, they look quite nice. So don't get bogged down with details. Oh, got nice doorways there as well, haven't we? I'll put that in. There you go. Little doorway. And I think I'm going to put just a little bit more dark here and here. Just so I can kind of separate the cottage from the grasses and the shrubs in front of that. Just a little bit more dark there. There we go. When you find yourself looking for something to do, that's when it's time to stop. So we'll come away from that. Few more little details here, perhaps just a few more darks. So okay, I won't create too much detail here, but I did like the wall shape that we had on the initial drawing. So I'm going to go back into that and find some little shapes here that could become little stones. Not too many. That's probably enough, isn't it? So it's just that slight suggestion. A few more darker values. Let's put some darks here against this shape here. Softening off. It's always lots of water. You need more water than you think you need. You think your brush is wet, but it really should be dripping wet when you, especially when you're doing the softening off technique. Definitely need some stronger values coming on this side. I'm just going to put some little squiggle shapes that kind of suggest they're going smaller as they go back, and they're coming bigger as they come down into that foreground. Water, water on my brush, softening that away. There's so many techniques, isn't there, involved in just this simple one painting. But it's all starting to come together now. I think I'd like to reinforce some of those nice little posts that are taking us into the distance. Now I'm thinking about light catching a certain object, so I'm going to just bob in a few stronger darks. Clean the brush and rolling it around. To create those gorgeous little random shapes. I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm going to create darker marks. I'm following the lay of the land with my brush strokes. I'm pushing water. When I do that, by the way, I'm using kind of this section, you see here, this part of my brush, just to push that in. I think I'd like to suggest maybe a few little shadows, and we can do that two ways. We can either kind of put them in with a brush like this, pull those washes across, or we can do this. I'm going to stand up for this bit, sorry. We'll do this. We can kind of tap the brush into our picture. Put some water in that as well, that's nice. Just to help that along. Oh, some more yellows in there. Quite nice. Just pulling that across. And it's knowing when to stop, isn't it? I think our little painting actually is near to completion. I'd like to give it a little spritz before it dries. And I can see also, can you see these little tiny marks here that I left with the wax resist? Little dots. Putting little shadows onto things does kind of help to suggest that this is a flat area and that you've got little stones and little bits of grasses and stones. It just helps. It's just a suggestion, isn't it? It just helps to suggest those little shapes. And now I really do think that I should stop. Can't resist. One more. There we go. Oh, lovely. What's that? You can buy lots of textured mediums as well, by the way. You don't have to do this. You can put textured medium onto your paper before you start to paint, or you can mix it in with your watercolour, and that's going to give you a nice texture as well. So I'm going to stop at this point because I'm quite happy now with the picture. It's got a nice flow, and this is something that maybe I would perhaps paint another day, but maybe do a coloured version. Excuse me, I'm just bobbing my finger in my picture while I'm talking to you. Maybe I'd like to do a coloured version of that as well. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed that. Have a go. Please let me know how you go on. I'd love to see what you've done with the demonstration. And don't forget to subscribe if you don't mind, please, and to like if you do like. Lots of new exciting projects coming this way, so yeah, it would be great if you do subscribe, because then you'll receive notifications of what I'm doing next. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.